They imagined discovering that there was once a punishment so unimaginably horrific, so fundamentally evil in its conception and execution, that it was employed only a single time in all of human history before being immediately banned and erased from official records by the very authorities who had ordered its creation. This wasn't a case of a punishment being abandoned because it was ineffective or too expensive. It was discontinued because everyone who witnessed its implementation, from the hardened executioners to the ruling officials who had commissioned it, were so psychologically traumatized by what they had seen that they collectively agreed that such a level of systematic cruelty should never again be inflicted upon any human being, regardless of their crimes or the political necessity for deterrence. What you're about to learn represents the absolute nadir of human cruelty, a punishment so perfectly engineered to destroy not just the victim's body, but their very soul, that its single use created such profound moral horror that it forced an entire civilization to confront the possibility that some forms of evil were so pure and absolute that they corrupted everyone who came into contact with them. The punishment known as the ultimate damnation was created in 1348 in the Papal States as a response to what church authorities considered the most heinous crime in Christian history, the systematic desecration of the Eucharist, combined with the murder of dozens of clergy members by a group of heretics who had declared war on the Catholic Church itself. The crime was so shocking that Pope Clement VI personally commissioned a team of theologians, physicians, and torture specialists to create a punishment that would not only inflict maximum physical suffering, but would also serve as a demonstration of divine justice that would deter any future attacks on the Church's sacred authority. The team spent months designing a form of execution that would incorporate every known method of torture, while adding innovative elements that would ensure the victim experienced systematic destruction of body, mind, and soul in ways that would serve as the ultimate example of what happened to those who challenged God's representatives on earth. The construction of the ultimate damnation apparatus required the combined expertise of master craftsmen, physicians, theologians, and engineers who worked together to create what was essentially a machine for systematic soul destruction that incorporated cutting-edge technology, advanced medical knowledge, and sophisticated theological understanding of the relationship between physical suffering and spiritual corruption. The device consisted of multiple integrated systems that could apply every known form of torture simultaneously while providing medical support that would keep the victim conscious and responsive throughout a process that was designed to last for exactly 7 days and 7 nights, a timeline chosen for its biblical significance as representing the complete creation and destruction of a human being. The apparatus included mechanical systems for crushing, stretching, burning, and cutting, chemical systems for poisoning and tissue destruction, psychological manipulation devices for mental torture, and medical support systems that could maintain life during trauma that would normally cause immediate death. The theological framework that justified the ultimate damnation reveals how sophisticated religious thinking could be corrupted to provide intellectual cover for systematic evil that exceeded all previous concepts of divine justice or acceptable punishment. Church scholars developed elaborate arguments claiming that certain crimes against God were so heinous that they required punishment that transcended earthly justice and entered the realm of divine retribution that would prepare the victim's soul for the eternal damnation that awaited them in the afterlife. The 7-day duration was justified as providing the victim with extended opportunities for repentance while demonstrating God's mercy through the delay of their ultimate spiritual destruction, while the systematic nature of the torture was portrayed as necessary purification that would cleanse the victim of their sins through suffering that mirrored the torments of purgatory and hell. The theological justification became so elaborate and internally consistent that many church authorities convinced themselves that the ultimate damnation was actually an act of divine mercy rather than systematic torture. The medical protocols developed for the ultimate damnation demonstrate how healing expertise could be completely perverted to serve the goal of prolonging suffering while ensuring that the victim remained conscious and aware throughout 7 days of systematic destruction that would normally cause death within hours. The medical team included specialists in every aspect of human physiology who worked together to develop techniques for maintaining life during trauma that exceeded all previous understanding of human endurance limits. The protocols included precise schedules for applying different types of damage that would maximize suffering while avoiding fatal injuries, drug regimens that would enhance pain sensitivity while preventing unconsciousness, surgical procedures that would repair damage just enough to allow continued torture without enabling recovery, and life support systems that could sustain vital functions even when the victim's body was approaching complete systemic failure. The psychological aspects of the ultimate damnation were designed to destroy the victim's sense of identity, religious faith, and connection to humanity, while creating mental conditions that would make every moment of physical torture exponentially more devastating through the systematic elimination of any psychological resources that might provide comfort or hope. The psychological torture included forced participation in blasphemous rituals that would corrupt the victim's soul, systematic destruction of their memories and personal identity through drug-induced amnesia and disorientation, sensory manipulation that would create hallucinations and false perceptions that would undermine their grasp on reality, and social isolation techniques that would sever their connection to human community while making them feel completely abandoned by both God and humanity. The most devastating psychological element was the systematic destruction of hope through detailed explanations of how much suffering remained, while ensuring that the victim understood that their torment was divinely ordained and would continue in the afterlife. The implementation of the ultimate damnation on its single victim created a spectacle so horrifying that witnesses began experiencing psychological breakdowns within hours of the torture's commencement, leading to mass hysteria and religious crisis that threatened the stability of the papal government itself. The victim, a heretic leader named Marcus of Ravenna, was subjected to the full 7-day ordeal while thousands of spectators gathered to witness what they had been told would be the ultimate demonstration of divine justice against enemies of the Church. However, the reality of watching a human being systematically destroyed over 7 days, while remaining conscious and aware throughout their ordeal, created psychological trauma so severe that many witnesses suffered permanent mental damage, while others experienced religious crises that led them to question the fundamental nature of divine justice and church authority. The systematic documentation of the ultimate damnation's effects created detailed records that provide disturbing insights into how the punishment achieved its goal of complete human destruction, while revealing the profound psychological impact on everyone involved in its implementation. The records describe how the victim's personality completely disintegrated by the 3rd day, as the combination of physical trauma, chemical torture, and psychological manipulation destroyed their ability to maintain coherent consciousness or personal identity. The medical logs show how life support systems were required almost constantly after the 4th day as the victim's body approached complete systemic failure, while drugs and mechanical intervention kept them alive and responsive. The psychological assessments document how the victim's religious faith was systematically destroyed through forced participation in blasphemy, while their connection to humanity was severed through social isolation and identity destruction that left them existing as a purely suffering entity without any remaining human characteristics. The immediate aftermath of the ultimate damnation created such profound moral and psychological crisis among church authorities that Pope Clement VI issued an unprecedented decree banning any future use of the punishment, while ordering the destruction of all equipment and documentation related to its implementation. The psychological trauma experienced by the torture specialists, medical personnel, and religious officials who had participated in or witnessed the ultimate damnation was so severe that many required ongoing spiritual counseling and medical treatment, while others suffered complete psychological breakdowns that ended their careers and destroyed their personal lives. The spectators who had witnessed the 7-day torture reported nightmares, hallucinations, and religious crises that persisted for years after the event, while many developed what we would now recognize as severe post-traumatic stress disorder that made normal social functioning impossible. The theological implications of the ultimate damnation forced church scholars to confront fundamental questions about the nature of divine justice, the limits of earthly punishment, and the relationship between physical suffering and spiritual salvation that challenged core Catholic doctrines and threatened the intellectual foundations of medieval Christianity. Many theologians who had initially supported the punishment began to argue that creating such systematic evil regardless of its intended purpose, was itself a sin that corrupted everyone involved, while demonstrating that human beings could create forms of suffering that exceeded even divine punishment in their cruelty and systematic nature. The theological crisis created by the ultimate damnation contributed to broader questioning of church authority and the development of more nuanced understandings of divine justice that would influence Catholic thinking for centuries afterward. The political consequences of the ultimate damnation extended far beyond the immediate moral crisis to affect international relations, church-state relationships, and the papal authority throughout Europe as news of the seven-day torture spread and created diplomatic incidents that threatened the Church's political position. Foreign governments expressed horror at the systematic nature of the torture, while questioning whether church authorities, who could create such evil, should be trusted with political power or moral authority over Christian populations. The reputation for extreme cruelty that developed around the papal government affected diplomatic relationships and trade agreements, while contributing to broader political movements that sought to limit church authority and establish secular controls over ecclesiastical power. The international reaction was so negative that it contributed to the eventual relocation of the papal court and major reforms in church governance that reduced the political power of religious authorities. The economic costs of the ultimate damnation were enormous, not just in terms of the resources required for its implementation, but also in the broader economic disruption caused by the social and psychological crisis that followed its use. The construction of the apparatus and the employment of specialized personnel for 7 days represented major financial investments, while the ongoing costs of treating the psychological trauma experienced by participants and witnesses created additional economic burdens that persisted for years after the torture had concluded. The disruption of normal social and economic activities during the 7-day spectacle also created significant costs, while the long-term effects on community mental health and social functioning generated ongoing expenses that affected the papal territories for decades. The technological innovations developed for the ultimate damnation represented some of the most advanced applications of medieval engineering, medicine, and chemistry to the problem of systematic human destruction, demonstrating how cutting-edge knowledge could be corrupted to serve pure evil when moral constraints were completely abandoned. The life support systems required for maintaining consciousness during 7 days of extreme trauma represented advances in medical technology that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era, while the mechanical torture devices incorporated precision engineering that required master craftsmen and advanced metallurgy. The chemical systems for enhancing pain and preventing unconsciousness utilized sophisticated understanding of pharmacology and toxicology that demonstrated how scientific knowledge could be applied to causing rather than relieving suffering when institutional objectives prioritized terror over human welfare. The complete suppression of information about the ultimate damnation created one of history's most successful cover-ups, with church authorities systematically destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses to prevent knowledge of their most shameful act from influencing future generations or providing inspiration for similar atrocities. The destruction of documentation was so thorough that only fragmentary records survived in private collections and secret archives, while participants were sworn to secrecy under threat of excommunication and eternal damnation if they revealed any details about what they had witnessed or participated in. The cover-up was so effective that knowledge of the ultimate damnation was successfully suppressed for over 6 centuries, until modern historians discovered references in private letters and coded documents that revealed the existence of this ultimate expression of institutional evil. The psychological research that emerged from studying the effects of the ultimate damnation contributed to understanding of human pain tolerance, psychological breakdown, and the relationship between physical trauma and mental functioning that influenced medical and psychological knowledge for centuries, despite being based on systematic torture rather than ethical research methodology. The detailed documentation of how systematic torture could destroy human personality and consciousness provided insights into the nature of human identity and psychological resilience that informed broader understanding of mental health and trauma recovery, while the medical knowledge gained from maintaining life during extreme trauma contributed to advances in emergency medicine and life support technology. However, the fact that this knowledge was gained through pure evil rather than ethical research demonstrates how scientific understanding could advance through systematic cruelty when moral constraints were abandoned in favor of institutional objectives that treated human suffering as acceptable cost for gaining knowledge or demonstrating power. Perhaps most disturbing of all is how the ultimate damnation reveals the extraordinary human capacity for creating pure evil through the systematic application of advanced knowledge, sophisticated technology, and institutional authority to the problem of destroying not just human life but the very essence of what makes someone human. The fact that respected authorities could conceive, design, and implement systematic soul destruction while maintaining their sense of religious righteousness and institutional legitimacy demonstrates how completely moral reasoning can be corrupted when systematic cruelty is presented as necessary service to higher purposes that transcend individual human welfare. The immediate recognition that the ultimate damnation represented unacceptable evil that should never be repeated provides hope that human moral sense can sometimes overcome institutional pressure and recognize absolute boundaries that should not be crossed. But the fact that such a punishment could be created at all serves as a permanent warning about the potential for human intelligence and authority to serve the darkest aspects of systematic evil when societies abandon fundamental moral constraints in favor of abstract goals that prioritize institutional power over human dignity and spiritual welfare. What do you think about this absolutely terrifying demonstration of how institutional authority, advanced knowledge, and religious justification could combine to create a punishment so fundamentally evil that it was immediately banned after its single use because everyone involved recognized that they had created something that exceeded all acceptable boundaries of human cruelty? Can you imagine the psychological horror of witnessing systematic soul destruction that was so methodical and complete that it traumatized even hardened torture specialists and religious authorities who had commissioned it? The fact that this ultimate expression of evil was successfully covered up for centuries really makes you wonder what other historical atrocities might have been suppressed to protect institutional reputations and prevent moral crises that could challenge established authority, doesn't it? Share your thoughts in the comments about how this historical example might relate to contemporary institutions that might be capable of creating systematic evil while maintaining claims to moral authority and social necessity. If you found this investigation into history's most successfully suppressed punishment as disturbing and thought-provoking as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking revelations about how human institutions can create systematic evil while maintaining claims to moral legitimacy and social benefit. Ring that notification bell because our next deep dive will explore another example of how institutional authority can be corrupted to serve systematic cruelty when moral constraints are abandoned in favor of abstract goals that prioritize power over human welfare. Trust me, these stories will change how you think about the relationship between authority, knowledge, and moral responsibility forever.